which is cheaper to do, investing in captive energy or building those long transmission lines?
Both.
No, which is cheaper?
Well, you know, if you put one big power plant, it's actually cheaper to run than having small 10 units. It takes like 10 of those units to build to make up one single unit. In China, you go to Three Gorges, just one power plant is about 40,000 megawatts, one location.
Do you think we're doing enough about stopping gas flaring?
I think we're not doing enough about stopping gas flaring. I think, again, there's also another commercial issue involving gas flaring. I also think there's a political will that is required to stop gas flaring. Let me tell you one of the problems that is involved in the entire, gas problem that we have. 60% of the IOCs, between 50 to 60% of the IOCs is owned by the federal government. Okay? The remaining 40, 50% is owned by the IOCs. Now, each time you need a capital investment to either cap this gas or build gas lines to take gas from where they are to where they are needed, there's a capital investment involved. Then it comes to the boardroom. And in boardroom, you say, okay, Mr. Olotu, you own 60% of this company, so we are going to spend $1 billion. Your contribution to that $1 billion is $600 million. So bring this, I will bring my own $400 million. If I deter from doing so, I delay in doing so, of course that investment will not crystallize.
So anytime they say we must stop gas flaring, the buck actually stops on their table, the federal government.
Of course, because the federal government owns 60% of it. So it should be able to use its power as a 60% owner to dictate the pace.
That's the political will you talk about.
That's the political will.
Okay, so given our capacity, realistically now, having looked at the infrastructure and all that it entails, how much electricity can we generate in 1 year?
I think conservatively that we can have up to 6,000 to 6,500 megawatts. When this gas issue is, and I think the gas issue can be resolved with the correct political will. Okay?
6 to 6,500 every year?
No, right now.
As it is now,
right
we
now.
can. Okay,
and
so
then,
it's a different ballgame.
And then gradually, okay, within the partnership between the private and the various government agencies, gradually continue to put in place a mechanism for a gradual increment in the capacities that we have. And this capacity I'm talking about is not capacity for generation alone. It's capacity for both transmission
I was going to ask
distribution.
You that, because right now that the government alone handles this transmission, how would that work? Would they need to privatize transmission?
Of course, ultimately, transmission needs to be privatized.
How quickly should that be if we want to achieve this?
I believe transmission should be privatized in the next 1 year.
Next one.
The truth is this. We have gone away from government involvement in business. This is real business. Government should restrict itself to providing the enabling environment to grow business, make business safe, make business profitable, and receive taxes from those who do the business in the right form. The private sector is the best agency can do that. Now, but the government needs to do all the legal frameworks to allow that to happen. That's what government should be restricting itself to doing. Now, here is how it happens. The transmission network usually should have capacity of about 20% more than the generation capacity that we have on ground. Create flexibility in the system. The distribution network should also have a little bit more than what the transmission capacity is on ground, in order for it to also carry the power and create flexibility and sustain that flexibilities. Now, what we have in Nigeria today is in reverse, okay? transmission is not as much as
what is it?
Generation.
I was going to ask you, what's the capacity we have?
You are looking at an
distribution, transmission.
You are looking at an installed capacity for generation of about 8,000 megawatts. You are seeing transmission, like I said, about 6,000 megawatts. And you are seeing distribution, that is a little bit lower than that. It should have been all in the reverse proportion. Okay? Distribution should be far, far higher than transmission. Transmission far higher than generation. Okay? For it to be a perfect mix.
There's so many issues in this, because I'm just wondering if the FG, if you were to be Minister of Power now, which one policy do you think you will push that will ensure that things move in, and then this 6,000 megawatts capacity we have, it's on stream, uninterrupted?
I'll tell you what I'll do. I will recognize what is on ground, which is what we have just described. The capacities that NIPP has contributed to the system is massive, but you cannot see it because the last bit of that equation is not in place in the quantum that is required. So let's look at that last bit. We need to sit down with my petroleum counterpart to fashion out how we must do this. You see, there is a value, yes, a direct, immediate value in obtaining a higher price for selling the gas outside Nigeria. That value is maybe you can sell it at $7 or maybe $4. There's an immediate big value. But there is about 3 times that which is lost. And that must be understood. So if we sell the gas in Nigeria and sell it for, say, $4 or $3, that's far less than you are getting right now. So you make an immediate loss of $3, right? But then what you do is that you put so much stranded capacity into operation. And that then generates enough power to power our industries, our businesses, our schools, our hospitals.
Well, would they accept that, because this is business for them if they lose?
Yeah, it's a national issue.
Okay.
Okay? The nation comes first. And that is why in many nations, you look at critical areas of the nation's business and you provide subsidy in that area. So this is a kind of subsidy. But it's the subsidy in the right direction.
So move it away from petroleum, send it to power.
Yeah, move some away from petrol and send it to power.
Not
all. because power cannot even consume all anyway. You are looking at about so many billions of gas that is currently being sold. I'm not saying move all of them out, because you have forward contracts. There are legal issues to face in those kinds of situations. You understand what I'm saying? But then your nation needs this thing so desperately. So why will I be selling everything that I have and yet need them so desperately? This is why we need gas in our filling stations. But we now say, oh, let's carry the crude oil and take them outside Nigeria and refine them and then bring them back, which is what is causing all the problems that we have right now. So we must look at which ones first. A patriotic Nigerian will look for servicing Nigeria first before taking the business outside there. Even though that business also provides us with capital to do other business. You understand what I'm saying? But you must create a balance.
So, if in the first year, if we put all this in place and get maybe 6,000, what about the subsequent years?
Yeah.
How long?
Then there will be, see, when you open up the sector, which was one of the things we tried to do, and that was to privatize the 10 power plants that we have. Because we don't believe our business is to create the infrastructure and let the private sector take them over and run them professionally so that you can have value for them, at least better value for them than if government is handling those. Now, if that had happened, the private sector takes over these assets. We receive $5.7 billion, which was what was bidded for at that time. That $5.7 billion, you add them again to additional, infrastructure development. In hydro, we diversify away from gas, take hydro, take coal, take other renewable energy, and begin to invest in those, and additional transmission capacity to raise the barrier beyond what we have right now. You understand what I'm saying? And that is the way we are going. But again, this same gas problem the issues of tariff, the issues of bankability of the exercise frustrated that from happening. But you see, that is still the way to go, because the government cannot on its own continue to pump the money. I said to you that the cost of building power is not cheap. It's about $1.2, $1.3 million for 1 megawatt.
But the privatized ones now, there are many who have lots of questions about it. Yes, you say government cannot continue to pump money, but are you impressed with the way they are carrying on now?
Yeah, that is, you mean the PACN privatized one? I must say that we are all a little bit disappointed that, you know, it has turned out the way it has. The expectation was that, for instance, the private sector takes over these power plants and the discos, and then pumping additional investment into reinforcing the network, make them a little bit more efficient and more effective, reduce losses that currently is very high, higher than anywhere else in the world, and then collect monies through systems that are transparent, okay, and customer friendly. And then this money now goes back into the system. That was what we expected. And then hopefully within a short time, the power begins to come up. But what you find is that the guys who bought into these privatized companies do not have the money. That's my take. They don't have the money. They go to the banks for money. The banks they are using are Nigerian banks. The Nigerian banks cannot give long-term capital. They can give long-term loans because their source of funds is short-term loans. And short-term loans are expensive at 18%, 22%. You can't run a business that way. That is another area where the Nigerian government must look into. I said earlier on that you must provide an enabling environment for encouraging business to take place. In China, you can obtain loans at 3%, at 4%. Okay, but in Nigeria, you are obtaining loans at 18% and 22%. And that cannot foster the kind of development that we want in Nigeria. So as a policy, the central bank must find a way by which this two-digit interest rate on loans to the real sector of the economy is reversed. And that is by putting government funding in private commercial banks and not hiding them in central bank or in JP Morgan and Chase outside the shores of this country. Now, when you have long-term monies like that inside the commercial banks and their rules and regulations for operating those banks and the supervision on those banks not to do crazy things that we have had stories about in the past, I believe that such monies can then be invested in the real sector and crystallize into huge development in the nation.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. Interesting perspective. Mr. James Olotu is the Managing Director, Niger Delta Power Holding Company. Thank you for coming on again today.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back after the break. Please join us again.